No, I'm the designer, the builder, and the maintainer of the gardens. Maintainer, I guess that's a word, I don't know. At least I do the maintenance. And that's principally been my job for 13 years now. And hopefully it'll continue for many more years. Nothing exciting. I was born in Cleveland, Ohio, December 1st, 1927. That's ancient time now, ancient. And I lived there until 1953, when I first came here. My neighborhood was a poor neighborhood, and hardly anybody went to school. In my high school, I don't think more than a couple dozen went to high school, and it was one of the largest classes in the state, actually, who graduated. I got in a technical program, and technical prepared you for different jobs in factories, Cleveland having a lot of factories and things. So I decided to specialize, major in mechanical drafting in equipment, machinery, and all kinds of things like that. Then I decided that I would go in graduate school into cartography. So that's when I came here to Illinois, because they were offering cartography at that time. And I was here 2 months, and I was hauled out of the Army because it's at the end of the Korean War. And I told the draft board that I was coming here, being dutiful to change my address and this kind of stuff. And I never heard a word from them. And I assumed that I was okay to go to grad school. As soon as I came here and they got my address, they noted, you have to go in the Army. Yeah. So I had to drop here. I appealed for that and didn't do any good. So April 1st, April Fool's Day, I went into the Army. And the war ended while I was in basic training for the Korean War, so I was lucky to miss all of that. So at that time, the war had ended, but they sent me to Tokyo and I talked myself into a wonderful job, even though I was a lowly private right at the bottom, but I had a sergeant's job of supervising 10 Japanese draftsmen. And they were making the maps, I was supervising. So to me, it was a wonderful job I had in Japan while I was there. And I had lots of time on weekends and a couple of official time offs to take trips around the country a little bit. So I did see the country, the middle third, quite thoroughly, and became totally enamored with Japan, and liked the culture very much. At that time, I certainly didn't know much about it, but and I only saw a few gardens, only in Tokyo. Other places, you'd see a little things, but I wasn't into gardens at all. But I liked what I had seen. But I was very active. At that time, I still was active in geology and mentally. Being a volcanic island, I went to climb Fuji, of course, and climbed a couple of active volcanoes, some of them quite dangerous, being right down into the center of the craters, and things like that. But I did a lot of hiking in the mountains there, the Japanese Alps, they call them. Stayed in inns all the time because the Japanese inns were the only thing cheap and the only things readily distributed around the country. Now hotels are everywhere and inns are very expensive, but at that time the inns were extremely cheap. And so just going around, talking with the people, seeing them and everything, I just absorbed that. And I said, when I got back, after my graduation here, working full-time, I said, I'd like to have something that's Japanese as a house, something as a garden. So that's basically how it started. And my land, my property that I bought for the house on South First Street is about 6/10 of an acre. That's quite a bit of land. And I had to fill it up with something, so I filled it up with Japanese garden for the most part. And so that's the beginning of that garden. And with 13 years work before I started here, I had plenty of experience of what to use in plants and how to maintain them, all this kind of stuff. Because my garden at home has got a pond, it's got a mandarin stream through it, it has the woods that I built, and hills, all of this big on a flat, what was once flat cornfield. And I modified that completely, so it is quite different. So, right now, here at Japan House, yes, the gardens around are finished. They're growing, they're almost mature, at least the trees will say. I should point out that the gardens that we have around here now were really basically done by students. The gardens were built by students. I'm proud of that because some were hired, some were just volunteered, want to work on this, not knowing anything about gardening, not knowing anything about Japanese gardens, but they wanted to be involved. And now with the stroll garden and walking garden, we're talking about a really serious garden. And I still think the garden can be built by students. All that. So what's out there right now is exactly the way you'll find it in Japan. And it's repeatedly done that way. As are other things, like the bamboo fencing, using black rope to tie the bamboo together. There's certain knots they used to give that attractive appearance to the ends of the knots coming down. And you don't just tie any old knot. They have a definite tie, and I've done that with these fences here, so it is correct to that. So that's the next project. Now I understand part of that is I have a bridge planned, and from my understanding there is money for that bridge. That bridge I thought might be built this fall, there was talk of it, but most likely next spring. And then the island possibly might be landscaped. This is still up in the air about that. Well, that is the beginning of the stroll garden. I had planned way back, a good 5-10 years I think, a part of the stroll garden is an iris garden. Now, iris are used very, very nicely in Japanese gardens. They use only the one kind, their own Japanese iris. They grow here, but not as well as other iris. So I decided that instead of just a single type of iris, I would have every kind of iris that would grow in the Midwest like this, and more varied. That way you can have blooming iris from spring all the way through fall and summer, blooming all the time. And I've designed that, I have that ready to go, and possibly we might get that going again too, so I don't know. But anyway, that's the future, to do the stroll garden. And to build that garden entirely would take, I would say, at least 3 to 5 years, probably, anyway. And so I do feel that if my fans are enjoying the gardens, that makes me feel very, very good. And that's the real purpose of a garden, to enjoy the gardens. So I'm happy that people enjoy it. Well, let's go into the tea garden. When a guest is invited in for a tea ceremony, they go through this path up to the waiting bench, where they are invited in by the host or the hostess. They come through the outer garden first, which is part of where the waiting bench is located. And they are invited in by the host or hostess, go past the gate which divides the outer garden from the inner garden, and you pause at the water basin, where you take a little sip of water and rinse your fingers lightly, symbolically, before you go into tea room for tea ceremony. But this is the inner garden, which is a big contrast with the outer garden. Outer garden being more formal and more evergreen, whereas the inner garden is more deciduous and more loosely pruned. And I'm giving it a more wild effect, as if you were up in the mountains someplace, or deep in a valley someplace that is away from civilization. This being the woods here, with a lot of shade-loving plants. In the springtime, there are ferns, hostas, a whole variety of plants that give it a more lush feeling in the springtime. Every Japanese garden must have water in it. Tea garden has the water basin, or tsukubai. But here, we have no water, at least represented, except by gravel. So when you look at this gravel, it can be a pond, a lake, an ocean, whatever your imagination carries you. And then the rest of it is, or behind us, is a mountain range or hills. And then behind that are high bayberries, which are slowly being pruned eventually into suggesting clouds. So it's a very simple garden. And around the rocks, around the perimeter of the pond or lake, waves are coming up in a pattern. And that is a type of dry garden. There are many different sizes of these gardens, most of them on the small size. Some are more formal, square, or rectangular. This one is a more free form.